1 minute ago, the earth beneath northern Japan tore open in darkness. At 11:14 p.m. local time, a magnitude 7.5 earthquake ripped through the ocean floor off Aomori Prefecture. Roads fractured, buildings swayed, power lines snapped across entire towns. But this tremor was different from the thousands Japan endures each year. Within hours, the government issued something unprecedented, a Megaquake advisory, the first for the Japan Trench and Kuril Trench since the system was created in 2022. What makes this earthquake the trigger for nationwide alarm? Why are 90,000 people abandoning their homes in the middle of winter? And when scientists say there is a 1% chance of catastrophe, what does that really mean? The rupture began at 23:14 Japan Standard Time on December 9, 2025. The epicenter sat at coordinates 15.8 degrees north, 122.8 degrees east, positioned just offshore from Aomori Province along the volatile Pacific coast. Magnitude 7.5, shallow depth, maximum energy transfer. Seismic stations across northern Honshu registered violent shaking. The tremor lasted 90 seconds, long enough for cabinets to empty their contents, for windows to shatter, for people standing upright to lose their balance completely. Within 3 minutes, tsunami advisories blared across coastal prefectures. Sirens wailed in Hokkaido. Emergency broadcasts interrupted television programming. Mobile phones screamed alerts in unison. Small tsunami waves arrived quickly, 70 centimeters high in some harbors. Not destructive on their own, but a reminder that the ocean had moved, that something deep below had shifted violently. By midnight, traffic choked the highways leading inland. Headlights streamed away from the coast in long, glowing rivers. Families loaded elderly relatives into cars, grabbed emergency bags from closets, and drove into the winter night without looking back. Over 90,000 residents evacuated before dawn. Aomori Prefecture, Hokkaido, the Sanriku coast. Evacuation centers opened their doors to floods of frightened people seeking safety on higher ground. In the town of Tōhoku, a vehicle sat motionless on a road that had split cleanly down the center. The asphalt gaped open, exposing raw earth below. Aerial photographs captured dozens of similar scenes across Aomori Prefecture. At least 34 people sustained injuries. Most were minor, bruises from falling objects, cuts from broken glass. But the physical toll was not the point. The fear was the point. In Hashikami, Daiki Shimohata, a 33-year-old civil servant, sprinted outside with his family as the ground bucked beneath them. The tremor was something we had never experienced, he told reporters the next morning. His voice carried the weight of someone who had just glimpsed the edge of disaster. Across the affected region, evacuation shelters transformed into temporary cities, gymnasium floors filled with families huddled on blankets. Children slept in their parents' arms. The elderly sat upright in folding chairs, unable to lie down comfortably. Power flickered on and off. Water pressure dropped in some facilities. Supplies were adequate, but the atmosphere was tense. Every person in those shelters understood the precariousness of their situation. Then the advisory came. At 8 a.m. UTC on December 10th, behind closed doors at the Japan Meteorological Agency headquarters in Tokyo, an emergency expert panel convened. Data streamed in from seismic stations. Pressure sensors on the ocean floor transmitted real-time measurements. Algorithms calculated stress patterns along fault lines. The decision came swiftly. Issue a Megaquake advisory. This was not a prediction of imminent catastrophe. The advisory carried no specific timeline, no guarantee of safety, no certainty of danger. What it offered was statistical honesty. The probability of a magnitude 8.0 or larger earthquake occurring within the next 7 days had risen to approximately 1%, statistically higher than baseline, statistically unacceptable. Cabinet official for disaster prevention Tsukasa Morikubo faced television cameras hours later. His expression was grave. It is unclear whether a large-scale earthquake will occur, but everyone should heed the call to take precautions to protect their own lives. What followed across northern Japan was not chaos, it was something far more unsettling. Organized, methodical fear. Government websites updated with detailed instructions. Keep an emergency bag containing several days of necessities. Include shoes and helmets. Discussed evacuation procedures with family members. Sleep in day clothes, not pajamas. Secure furniture to walls and floors. The message underneath every directive was clear. Be ready to run with no warning. This level of vigilance is rooted in memory. Painful, indelible memory. On March 11, 2011, at precisely 14:46 Japan Standard Time, the seafloor 45 miles off the eastern coast began to rupture. The earthquake measured magnitude 9.0, the most powerful in Japan's recorded history, the fourth strongest globally since modern instruments began tracking seismic events.
The rupture did not happen in seconds. It stretched across 6 full minutes. 6 minutes of continuous tearing along the subduction zone where the Pacific Plate drives beneath the North American Plate. The ground shook with such violence that tall buildings in Tokyo, over 200 miles away, swayed visibly. In the epicenter region, roads buckled into impassable waves of asphalt. Rail lines twisted, bridges collapsed. The earth itself seemed to lose solidity. Then the ocean responded. Tsunami waves began forming within minutes of the initial rupture. These were not ordinary waves. They carried the momentum of billions of tons of displaced seawater accelerating toward shore at speeds exceeding 700 kilometers per hour. In coastal towns, residents received warnings, but the time between alert and impact was cruelly short. In Sendai, people had 8 to 10 minutes. In some locations, less than 5. The waves reached heights that defied comprehension. In Miyako, Iwate Prefecture, oceanographers later confirmed tsunami run-up heights of 40.5 meters. That is 133 feet, taller than a 10-story building, higher than anything in Japan's historical records except an 1896 event. When that wall of water struck, it did not crest and recede like a normal wave. It became a horizontal flood, traveling at tremendous speed inland. In the Sendai area, the tsunami penetrated up to 10 kilometers from the coastline. Seawalls that engineers had designed to withstand any conceivable tsunami were overtopped in seconds. Concrete barriers 10 meters high vanished beneath the surge. The water kept coming. Entire towns ceased to exist. Ishinomaki, Kesennuma, Kamaishi, Rikuzen Takata. Streets filled with churning debris. Houses were ripped from foundations and carried inland like cardboard boxes. Cars tumbled end over end in the current. More than 100 designated evacuation sites were inundated. The people who had fled to these supposedly safe locations drowned inside the shelters themselves. Safety became a death trap when the tsunami exceeded all projections. The temperature on March 11th was near freezing. Snow fell as the tsunami struck. Survivors found themselves soaked in frigid water, surrounded by wreckage, with darkness approaching. Hypothermia became a secondary killer. The official statistics released by Japan's National Police Agency in 2021 list 19,759 confirmed deaths. Another 2,553 people were declared missing. Their bodies never recovered from the ocean or the debris fields. Over 6,200 suffered injuries. More than 228,000 people lost their homes, either destroyed outright or rendered uninhabitable. Analyses of the death toll revealed a grim truth. 92% of victims drowned. The earthquake itself claimed relatively few lives. The tsunami was the executioner. Regional breakdowns show the devastation's concentration. Miyagi Prefecture lost 10,567 residents. Iwate Prefecture buried 5,145 of its citizens. Fukushima Prefecture mourned 3,920 dead. Smaller numbers accumulated across other prefectures. Tokyo lost 8, Hokkaido 1. The disaster destroyed or severely damaged over 400,000 buildings. Infrastructure across northeastern Honshu crumbled. Roads, railways, electrical grids, water systems, communication networks, the fabric of modern civilization in the region simply ceased functioning. This was not merely an earthquake. It was a revelation that the assumptions underlying coastal safety in Japan had been catastrophically inadequate. But March 11, 2011 held one more horror. At 15:27, roughly 40 minutes after the earthquake, the tsunami reached the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The facility's seawalls had been engineered to withstand a 5.7-meter wave based on historical data and probability models. The wave that struck was 15 meters in some areas. The seawater swept over the barriers as if they did not exist, flooding the plant's lower levels within minutes. Emergency diesel generators, positioned in basement areas for protection from typhoons, drowned. Without power, cooling systems for the reactor cores shut down. Temperature readings began climbing immediately. By the evening of March 12th, the situation had become critical. At 15:36, a hydrogen explosion blew the roof off reactor Unit 1. The blast was audible for kilometers. A massive plume of smoke and debris rose above the plant. 2 more explosions followed. Unit 3 on March 14th, Unit 2 experienced internal damage on March 15th. Each explosion released radioactive materials into the atmosphere and surrounding environment. Inside the containment structures, 3 reactor cores had entered meltdown. Nuclear fuel reached temperatures sufficient to breach containment vessels. Radioactive water accumulated in basement levels. Workers struggled in protective gear against rising radiation levels to prevent complete catastrophe. The Japanese government ordered evacuations in expanding circles around the plant. Eventually, over 160,000 people abandoned their homes. Entire municipalities became ghost towns overnight. Namie, Futaba, Okuma, Tomioka, Iitate, towns with centuries of history emptied within days. Residents grabbed what they could carry and left everything else behind. Most expected to return in weeks. Many have not returned at all. The International Atomic Energy Agency assigned Fukushima Daiichi a Level 7 rating on the International Nuclear Events Scale. This is the scale's maximum designation, reserved for major accidents with widespread health and environmental consequences. Only one other nuclear disaster in history has received this classification, Chernobyl in 1986. Today, portions of the exclusion zone remain off-limits. Radiation levels in specific areas prevent long-term human habitation. The Japanese government has reopened some evacuated zones after extensive decontamination, but psychological barriers remain as formidable as physical ones. Official statistics from the United Nations in 2021 concluded that the population around Fukushima suffered no adverse health events directly attributable to radiation exposure, yet fear persists. Cancer screening rates remain elevated. Return rates to evacuated zones hover below 30% in most towns. The shadow of Fukushima extends beyond radiation. It represents the terrifying possibility of cascading failures. Earthquake triggers tsunami. Tsunami destroys nuclear plant. Nuclear disaster displaces hundreds of thousands. One natural disaster becomes 3 interlocking catastrophes. This is why Japan remembers. This is why the country does not dismiss a 1% probability as merely unlikely.
Since March 2011, Japan has lived with an inescapable truth. The megaquake is not a historical anomaly. It is a recurring feature of the archipelago's existence. The only uncertainty is timing. This explains the reaction to December's magnitude 7.5 earthquake. Historical precedent is terrifying. The 2011 magnitude 9.0 event was preceded 2 days earlier by a magnitude 7.3 earthquake in nearly the same location. That earlier quake was dismissed as significant but not catastrophic. It was a foreshock. When the December 7.5 quake struck, seismologists immediately recognized the pattern: a large earthquake in the Japan Trench, followed by unusual seismic activity, exactly the signature that preceded the 2011 disaster. Hence the Megaquake advisory, not a guarantee of doom, but a statistical acknowledgement that the odds had shifted measurably toward catastrophe. After 2011, Japan's government made an irreversible decision. The country would never again be blind to events unfolding on the ocean floor. The March 11th earthquake had originated 45 miles offshore, beneath thousands of feet of seawater. Land-based seismometers detected the initial shockwaves, but provided no information about the rupture's true scale or the tsunami forming offshore. Japan had a devastating blind spot: the ocean itself. So, the nation embarked on the most ambitious seafloor monitoring project in human history. The goal was simple: wire the ocean floor with sensors sensitive enough to detect the earliest signs of rupture and transmit warnings before disaster reached the coast. SNET, the Seafloor Observation Network for Earthquakes and Tsunamis along the Japan Trench, became operational in 2017. The scale is staggering. Engineers laid 3,540 miles of fiber optic cable across 116,000 square miles of ocean floor. The network links 150 individual observatories positioned directly above the Japan Trench subduction zone. Each observatory contains 14 distinct sensing channels. Broadband seismometers detect the faintest ground motion. Accelerometers measure sudden jolts. Pressure gauges monitor changes in water column height that indicate tsunami formation. The data flow is continuous and instantaneous. Every sensor feeds information back to the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Resilience and the Japan Meteorological Agency. Algorithms analyze the incoming data streams in real time, searching for patterns that indicate imminent danger. The system's effectiveness was demonstrated in 2018 when a magnitude 6.0 earthquake struck offshore. SNET detected the initial rupture and transmitted alerts to coastal cities 20 seconds before the nearest land-based seismometer registered any shaking. 20 seconds. Enough time to broadcast warnings, halt bullet trains, and give people a chance to take cover. South of the Japan Trench lies another subduction zone of equal concern: the Nankai Trough, where the Philippine Sea Plate subducts beneath the Eurasian Plate, has produced devastating megaquakes throughout recorded history. The last major ruptures occurred in 1944 and 1946. Historical intervals between major events average 100 to 150 years. Japan is overdue. To monitor the Nankai Trough, engineers deployed DONET, the Dense Ocean Floor Network for Earthquakes and Tsunamis. Construction began in 2006. By 2013, the network had expanded to include over 460 miles of cables connecting 51 observation stations across the seafloor. In 2019, work began on NNet, the Nankai Trough Seafloor Observation Network, designed to complete coverage of the entire subduction zone. The system was finished in June 2025. Combined, these three networks represent over 200 instrumented nodes, continuously monitoring Japan's most dangerous fault lines. No other nation possesses anything comparable. The United States has preliminary plans for Cascadia subduction zone monitoring. Chile is considering similar infrastructure. But Japan stands alone in achieving complete, real-time coverage of its offshore earthquake zones. The sensors provide more than just warning time. They allow seismologists to detect subtle phenomena invisible to land-based instruments. Slow slip events, where tectonic plates gradually release stress without generating earthquakes, can now be tracked with precision. Measurements of seafloor uplift and subsidence reveal how stress accumulates along locked fault segments.
Scientists estimate the complete system adds 20 to 22 seconds of warning time for great earthquakes and potentially 20 additional minutes for tsunami alerts. In disaster response, these margins represent the difference between chaos and coordinated evacuation. But the technology has limits. The sensors cannot measure stress locked between tectonic plates. They cannot predict when accumulated strain will exceed the threshold for rupture. They cannot say whether the next earthquake will occur tomorrow, next month, or a decade from now. The instruments detect motion after it begins. They provide no window into the future, only a slightly longer reaction time to the present. For 1 week after the December 9th earthquake, northern Japan existed in a state of suspended anxiety. The Megaquake advisory remained in effect. Life continued, but under altered conditions. JR East Railway reduced maximum speeds on Shinkansen bullet trains traveling through coastal regions. Flights departing from northern airports carried additional fuel reserves in case diversions became necessary. Factories maintained emergency staff rotations. Schools conducted additional evacuation drills. Hospitals transferred critically ill patients away from tsunami-prone zones. Nursing facilities moved residents on ground floors to upper levels. Municipal governments checked evacuation route signage and confirmed shelter supplies. Families kept emergency bags by their front doors. Many parents required children to sleep fully clothed. Some households left lights on throughout the night, afraid that darkness would delay evacuation if alarms sounded. Every aftershock became a test of nerves. Is this the beginning? Should we run now? The psychological toll of sustained vigilance is difficult to quantify, but impossible to ignore. On December 17th, the Japan Meteorological Agency announced the advisory's end. Seismic activity along the Japan and Kuril trenches returned to baseline levels. No anomalies appeared in seafloor monitoring data. Statistical risk had decreased to normal, which is to say, still present but not elevated.
Residents were informed they could resume standard routines, but normal is relative in a country where the next megaquake remains not a possibility but a certainty. The government's worst-case modeling for a magnitude 9.0 earthquake in the Hokkaido Sanriku offshore region is not classified information. These projections are public, published by multiple agencies, discussed openly in disaster preparedness contexts. A rupture along the Japan Trench could generate tsunami waves reaching 30 meters in height. That is 98 feet, taller than most buildings in affected coastal towns. The modeling assumes the tsunami would reach shore within 20 minutes of the initial earthquake. Death toll projections reach 199,000 people. Over 220,000 residential and commercial structures would be destroyed outright. Economic damages could exceed 31 trillion yen, approximately $198 billion in current currency. These are optimistic estimates. They assume early warning systems function perfectly. They assume evacuation routes remain passable. They assume people make correct decisions under extreme stress. They assume infrastructure performs as designed despite damage from the preceding earthquake. Even with everything going right, nearly 200,000 people die in the models. The reality would almost certainly be worse. In Miyagi Prefecture, the Watanabe family understands these statistics are not abstractions. They are the Watanabe's future rendered in numbers. When the J-alert system screeched from their phones at 23:14 on December 9th, muscle memory took over. Shoes appeared on feet. Coats materialized from closets, emergency bags lifted from their designated spot by the door. The family's 12-year-old son, Kenji, grabbed the waterproof document pouch containing passports, insurance papers, and family photographs. His 9-year-old sister, Yuki, clutched a flashlight in one hand and her grandmother's arm with the other. Mrs. Watanabe supported her 78-year-old mother-in-law, who moved slowly but without complaint. They drove inland, following the evacuation route they had memorized through monthly drills. Traffic was heavy but organized. Everyone knew their destination. Everyone moved with purpose. At the evacuation center, they joined hundreds of other families on the gymnasium floor. Mrs. Watanabe checked her phone compulsively, waiting for updates. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady as she explained the situation to her children. "We don't know what's coming," she told Kenji and Yuki, "but we know what to do." That sentence captures the essence of Japanese disaster culture. Not denial, not optimism, not fatalism, simply preparation meeting uncertainty with readiness. Today, Japan exists in a state of informed suspense. The seafloor sensors pulse with data. Evacuation routes are marked and maintained. Emergency supplies are stockpiled in designated facilities. Drills continue on regular schedules. Scientists working at institutions across the country analyze every tremor, every slow slip event, every pressure anomaly on the ocean floor. They publish papers, they refine models, they update probability assessments. What they cannot do is predict the specific moment when the next great rupture will begin. Earthquake prediction remains beyond current scientific capability. The best seismology can offer is probability over time ranges, decades, not days. What is known is this: the Japan Trench and Kuril Trench are locked segments where stress accumulates continuously. Historical records show major ruptures recurring with rough regularity. The 2011 event released enormous energy but did not eliminate the tectonic forces driving plate convergence. What remains unknown is everything that matters most: the exact timing, the precise location along the fault, the magnitude, the resulting tsunami height, the number of lives at risk when it happens. The Megaquake Advisory System represents Japan's attempt to navigate this fundamental uncertainty. The system does not claim to predict earthquakes. It acknowledges when statistical risk temporarily elevates above baseline and urges heightened caution during that window. A 1% weekly probability sounds small, but over years and decades, those percentages compound. The difference between 1% and 0.01% matters when the consequence is 200,000 deaths. And the question that haunts Japan is simple: how do you maintain permanent readiness for an event that could strike tonight or 30 years from now?